The day Vintner's Quarterly published a 10-page spread calling my brother a once-in-a-generation visionary for the wine that I created, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even correct my mother when she framed the cover and hung it in the tasting room. I just smiled, congratulated him at dinner, and then, late that night, I went into my lab. I took a single, temperature-controlled vial, the one labeled E01, put it in a cooler, and walked out of the vineyard forever. They thought I was just being dramatic, taking a few days off. They had no idea I had just packed up the soul of our family's legacy and taken it with me. 3 months later, their award-winning wine tasted like flavored water, and my phone was ringing off the hook with my father's number, a man who hadn't willingly called me in 5 years. My life, up until that point, had been lived in the shadow of the great Blackwood Creek vineyard. It wasn't just a business. It was our family's identity, our history etched into 200 acres of rolling Virginia hills. My great-grandfather planted the first vines. My grandfather perfected the irrigation. And my father was good at marketing. He understood that people don't just buy wine. They buy a story. And the story he chose to tell was about his son, Liam. Liam was born for the spotlight. He had the right jawline, the easy laugh, the kind of casual confidence that made people want to invest in whatever he was selling. He looked like the kind of man you'd see on the cover of a magazine about wine, even if he couldn't tell a Pinot Noir from a Merlot in a blind taste test. He was the face, the brand, the story. And I was the ghost in the machine. My name is Elara. I was the winemaker, the real one. I wasn't just a winemaker. I was the viticulturist, the enologist, the damn soil chemist. My hands were the ones stained purple during harvest. My boots were the ones caked in the clay of the south-facing slope. I was the one who spent a decade of my life with my nose in textbooks and my back bent over vines, earning degrees in fermentation science and horticulture, while Liam was earning a C average in business administration before dropping out to find himself on a 6-month trip through Europe, funded by the vineyard's profits. Our dynamic was a silent, well-oiled machine. During tours, Liam would lead guests through the vineyards, gesturing broadly. As you can see, we practice a very specific form of canopy management that I developed to maximize sun exposure, he'd say, reciting the lines I'd written for him. Meanwhile, I'd be 20 rows over, actually doing the work, my face hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. In the tasting room, he'd swirl a glass of our flagship Cabernet Franc, the one that won the Governor's Cup 2 years running. "The key," he'd announce to a rapt audience, "is my unique approach to barrel aging. It's a family secret." The secret was me. The secret was the proprietary strain of yeast I had cultivated from a wild bloom on a single grape skin 5 years ago. I'd named it E01 for Elara, Sample 1. It was my discovery, my innovation. It produced a subtle, complex bouquet of dark cherry and vanilla that no commercial yeast could replicate. It was our fingerprint. It was my fingerprint. And it lived in a climate-controlled incubator in my lab, the one place Liam never entered because it smelled like a science experiment. The injustice wasn't a sudden storm. It was a slow, steady drizzle that had been soaking me for 20 years. It was my father, at dinner parties introducing us. This is my son Liam, the man behind the brand. And this is Elara. She helps out in the cellar. It was my mother, after I'd spent 72 hours straight nursing a batch of Chardonnay through a difficult fermentation, telling me I looked tired and should really let Liam handle the stressful parts. It was Liam accepting an award on stage, thanking my team, but never once saying my name. I was the foundation they had built their house on, and they had conveniently forgotten I was holding the whole thing up. I just kept working, telling myself the wine would speak for me. The quality, the awards, the critical acclaim, that would be my voice. I thought that if I just made something beautiful enough, undeniable enough, eventually, they would have to see me. Then the magazine called. Vintner's Quarterly was the pinnacle. A feature in their publication meant you had truly arrived. They wanted to do a profile on the genius of Blackwood Creek. I was ecstatic. This was it. This was the moment the truth would come out. The writer, a sharp woman named Isabel, was scheduled to spend 2 days at the vineyard. I prepared my notes, cleaned my lab, even bought a new shirt. The day she arrived, my father greeted her at the door. Isabel, welcome. Liam has been so excited to show you his process. He led her straight to Liam, who was leaning against a wine barrel, looking effortlessly rustic in a new flannel shirt. I stood in the doorway of the bottling room, holding a clipboard, waiting for my introduction. It never came. For 2 days, I watched from a distance as Liam paraded her around my vineyard. He took her to the highest point on the property, a spot I had shown him, and told her it was where he came for inspiration. He let the photographer take dozens of photos of him holding a wine thief, pretending to sample from a barrel I had personally blended and sealed a week prior. He repeated my words, my philosophies, my techniques, all while using the word I. I believe in minimal intervention. I designed this gravity flow system. I decided to plant the Petit Verdot on the western slope. I kept waiting for him to say it. Of course, I couldn't do any of this without my sister Elara. She's the real master behind all this. But he never did. My mother would bring them glasses of iced tea, beaming at her son, the star. My father would clap him on the back, and I just became part of the background, another piece of equipment. At one point, the photographer, a young observant guy, pointed his camera at me while I was testing the pH of a new batch. Hey, can I get a shot of you? For some of the process B-roll. Before I could answer, my mother stepped in front of the lens, laughing. Oh, don't mind her. She's just one of our cellar hands. We want to focus on the family story today. She guided him away, back towards Liam. One of our cellar hands. The words echoed in the cavernous room, louder than the hum of the cooling units. I wasn't family. I was staff. The article came out 3 months later. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. The cover was a full-page, heroic shot of Liam, staring thoughtfully into the middle distance, a glass of my award-winning wine in his hand. The headline, The Prince of Pinot, How Liam Blackwood Reinvented American Wine. 10 pages. Glossy photos of Liam. Long flowing paragraphs detailing his innate connection to the land, his daring techniques, his visionary palette. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not even in the photo captions. I had been completely, utterly, and publicly erased from my own life's work. That night, my parents threw a celebratory dinner. The framed magazine cover was hung over the fireplace. They toasted Liam, their son, the genius. He soaked it all in, accepting the praise as his due. "It was a team effort," he said magnanimously, which somehow felt even more insulting. Everyone looked at me, expecting me to join the chorus. So I raised my glass. "To Liam," I said, my voice perfectly even. "Congratulations." I smiled. I ate my dinner. I listened to my father talk about expanding the brand, now that they had this incredible press. I felt a strange calm settle over me, a profound and terrifying clarity. It wasn't anger anymore. It was acceptance. They would never see me. They were incapable of seeing me. And you cannot demand to be seen by people who are committed to looking right through you. So I stood up. "Excuse me," I said politely. "Long day. I think I'll turn in early." My mother nodded absently, already showing the article to a visiting cousin. Liam didn't even look up. I walked out of the house, not to my small cottage on the edge of the property, but to the lab. The building was dark and cool. The gentle hum of the equipment was the only sound. It felt more like home than the main house ever had. I walked over to the main incubator, entered the code, and opened the door. Inside were dozens of carefully labeled petri dishes and vials, the genetic library of our vineyard. My life's work. I took the mother culture, E01, the one from which all others were propagated. I placed it carefully into a small portable cooler. Then I went to my computer. I opened the server files containing all my blending notes, my fermentation logs, my harvest data for the last 10 years. I dragged them to the trash bin. Then I emptied the trash. I left the vineyard's shared server, a hollowed-out shell. My personal hard drives, of course, were safely in my bag. Finally, I walked back to the main lab bench and poured bleach into every other yeast culture I had been cultivating. A sterile, irreversible end. I left a single sticky note on the lab door. "Taking a few days off." I got in my car and drove away, the little cooler with the vial of yeast sitting on the passenger seat like a silent passenger. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I wasn't coming back. The first 2 weeks were a blur of cheap motels and long drives through the Blue Ridge Mountains. I needed to see a world that wasn't bordered by my family's property lines. The funny thing about being invisible for so long is that you get really good at being alone. The silence in my car wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was mine. For my entire life, my value had been tied to what I could produce for them. The perfect wine, the flawless balance sheet, the solution to a pest problem. Without the vineyard, who was I? I spent hours just sitting by rivers, walking through unfamiliar towns, and slowly the answer began to surface. I was the creator. I was the source. They had the brand, the land, the story. But I had the magic. My history with Liam wasn't built on a single act of theft. It was 1,000 tiny paper cuts. I remember being 10 years old and winning the county science fair. My project was on the effects of yeast on dough. I'd spent weeks meticulously documenting everything. Liam, who was 12, had forgotten he even had to enter until the night before. He'd thrown together a pathetic volcano out of clay and baking soda. On the day of the fair, he stood next to my booth, explaining my project to visitors, as if he were my co-researcher. "What we found," he'd say, "is that temperature is the key variable." When the judges came by, my parents nudged him forward. "Liam is the real science whiz in the family," my dad said with a wink. When I won the blue ribbon, the first words out of my mother's mouth were, "Oh, Liam, you must have been such a big help to your sister." I just smiled and put the ribbon in my pocket. It was easier than arguing. That pattern repeated itself through high school and college. The essays I helped him write. The business plans I outlined for his classes. The time I saved the entire vineyard from a catastrophic outbreak of powdery mildew when I was 19, home for the summer. I'd diagnosed it, sourced an organic fungicide from a small supplier in California, and organized the spraying schedule myself. My father was on vacation. Liam was somewhere. When my dad got back and saw the vineyard was saved, he clapped Liam on the shoulder. "Good man, son. Knew you could handle it." Liam didn't correct him. He just nodded, accepting the praise. I had learned early on that my accomplishments were only valuable when they could be attributed to him. My role was to be the silent, uncredited producer of his success. When I started developing the E01 yeast strain, it was my one secret. I did the work late at night, after everyone had gone home. It was mine. It felt sacred. It was the one part of the vineyard he couldn't touch, couldn't claim. But when the wines I made with it started winning major awards, the narrative shifted. Suddenly it was Liam's innovative spirit that had pushed the vineyard to new heights. They never asked for the details. They just filled in the blanks with his face. The magazine article wasn't a betrayal. It was just the logical conclusion of a story they'd been writing my entire life. They hadn't forgotten me. Forgetting implies you were there to begin with. They had simply never seen me at all. The first call came 3 weeks after I left. It was Liam. I was sitting in a small cafe in Asheville, North Carolina, and let it go to voicemail. His message was casual, almost breezy, but with a sharp edge of irritation underneath. "Hey, Elle. So, funny thing. The new batch of Cab Franc is weird. It's not fermenting right. Tastes flat. Dad's freaking out about the fall shipments. Anyway, your little vacation is over. We need you back here to fix whatever's wrong with it. Fix it. Not, what happened? Not, are you okay? Just, come back and fix it." He didn't see me as a sister, or even a person. I was a piece of machinery that had malfunctioned. I deleted the message. A week later, my mother called. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she used when she was trying to gently manipulate someone into doing what she wanted. "Elara, darling, we're all very worried about you. This isn't like you, just running off. Liam is trying his best, but things in the cellar are a bit of a mess. Why don't you come home, and we can all talk this out?" I didn't answer. The next day she had texted, "Your father is very disappointed in your unprofessionalism. Unprofessionalism. After 10 years of running their entire production with meticulous back-breaking care, my taking a break was unprofessional. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The real panic didn't set in for another month. That's when the distributors would have started tasting the new vintage. The wine made without me. The wine made without E01. I could picture it perfectly. Liam, trying to use a standard commercial yeast, following my old notes without understanding the nuance, the intuition. The result would be technically correct, but lifeless. A wine with no soul. The Blackwood Creek magic would be gone. The calls became more frantic. Liam left another voicemail, his voice tight with panic. "What did you do, Elara? What the hell did you do to the tanks? This is sabotage. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue you for everything you're worth." It was almost funny. I had no assets. My name wasn't on the vineyard's deed. My salary was a joke. The only thing of value I had, I'd taken with me. Finally, my father called. I answered. His voice was a low growl. "You have 5 minutes to explain yourself, young lady." I took a deep breath. The years of silence, of swallowing my words, had ended. My voice, when it came out, was calm and clear. "There's nothing to explain, Dad. I resigned." "Resigned? You didn't resign, you disappeared. You've sabotaged $1 million inventory. Our reputation is on the line." "My reputation was on the line every time you introduced me as a helper," I said, the words tasting strange and powerful. "My reputation was on the line when you let Liam take credit for my work, for my education, for my entire contribution to your success. My reputation was erased on the cover of Vintner's Quarterly. I didn't sabotage your wine. Your wine was never yours to begin with. It was mine, and I took it back." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, the sound heavy with disbelief. "This is about the magazine?" he finally sputtered. "You're destroying this family over a stupid magazine article? It was good for the brand, Elara. It helps all of us." "No," I said softly. "It helped, Liam. And you let it happen. You've always let it happen. Did you know, Dad, that I cultivated a unique strain of yeast, the one responsible for the flavor profile everyone praises? Did you know I named it? Did you ever once ask me about my process, my discoveries?" More silence. He didn't know. Of course he didn't know. He never cared to ask. "You didn't just let him take the credit," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "You handed it to him. You built his throne on top of my work, and then got angry when I decided to walk away instead of holding him up forever. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a ghost. Well, now you have one. Goodbye, Dad." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. It was the feeling of a chain, rusted and heavy, finally snapping. The fallout was a slow, beautiful train wreck. Liam, in his arrogance, tried to bluff his way through. He told their distributors that they were experimenting with a new profile. The distributors, who built their own reputations on quality and consistency, started canceling their orders. The bad reviews started to trickle in online. A shadow of its former self. Shockingly mediocre. Whatever made Blackwood Creek special is gone. Liam tried to hire a new winemaker, a well-respected guy from Napa. He lasted 6 weeks. He called me after he quit. A friend had passed along my number. "I just wanted to say," he said, his voice full of professional respect. "I have no idea how you did what you did. The terroir is good, but it's not magic. The magic was you. They have no idea what they lost." My mother started a campaign of guilt. She'd leave long, tearful voicemails. "How could you do this to your brother? He idolized you. You're tearing this family apart." It was a masterpiece of revisionist history. Liam had never idolized me. He had used me. And I wasn't tearing the family apart. I was simply refusing to be the glue that held their fantasy together. The most telling part was that in all their calls, all their texts, all their voicemails, not one of them ever said two simple words: "We're sorry." They never acknowledged the magazine, the erasure, the years of being overlooked. It was all about the wine, the money, the brand. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were just sorry they got caught. They were sorry for the consequences. I ended up in Oregon, in the Willamette Valley. I took a consulting job with a small up-and-coming vineyard, run by a woman my age. She had read about Blackwood Creek, not the glossy magazine profile, but the quiet industry chatter about its sudden, inexplicable decline. She listened to my story, looked at the data I had saved, and then she looked at the vial of E01 I had brought with me. She didn't see a helper. She saw a partner. She offered me a salary that was triple what my father had ever paid me, plus a percentage of the profits. For the first time, I signed a contract with my own name on it. The final call from my family came about 6 months after I left. It was Liam. His voice was hollow, all the bluster gone. He sounded like a child. "They're selling," he said, no preamble. "Dad's selling the vineyard. The bank is calling in the loans. We're ruined." I stayed silent, listening to the static on the line. "All you had to do was come back," he whispered. "All you had to do was fix it. Why did you have to blow everything up? It was perfect." And that was the tragedy of it all. To him, it had been perfect. A perfect system where he got all the glory, and I did all the work. My invisibility was a key feature, not a bug. "It was perfect for you, Liam," I said, my voice devoid of anger, full of a sad final pity. "But you built your house on my back, and eventually, I had to stand up." I hung up the phone and went back to work. Outside, the Oregon vines were heavy with grapes, waiting for the harvest. My harvest. My vintage. The lesson in all of this isn't about revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy fire. What I did was colder. Cleaner. It was an act of removal. I simply took myself out of their equation, and the entire thing collapsed. You can't be angry at a building for falling down when you've stolen its cornerstone. The real lesson is about value. My whole life, I had been waiting for them to give me a value that I already possessed. I was waiting for their acknowledgement, their praise, their recognition. But acknowledgement from people who benefit from your invisibility is not a gift. It's a cage. They didn't see me because they couldn't afford to. Seeing me would have meant admitting that the story they told themselves, the one about their brilliant son, was a lie. I learned that you have to be the primary author of your own story. You have to be the one to recognize your own worth, even if you're the only one in the room who does. Walking away from Blackwood Creek wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. They can keep the framed magazine cover. They can keep the hollowed-out tasting room and the fields of dying vines. They own the brand, but I own the vintage. And a vineyard without its wine is just a patch of dirt. I often wonder if they ever look at that magazine cover now and see the lie staring back at them. Do they finally see the ghost that was standing just out of frame? I'll never know. And for the first time in my life, I don't need to. My focus is on the future, on the new wine I'm creating, under a new label. A label with my name on it. So, here's my question to you. Have you ever been the ghost in your own family? The secret ingredient in someone else's success? Tell me your story in the comments. I promise I will see you. And if you've ever felt invisible, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to shout louder, but to simply walk away and take your magic with you.